Good morning. This is Kenneth and Heather with the Advancing Equity Coalition, here to give you a quick recap of what went down last night at our first board meeting in over a month. Heather, how are you doing today?
A little chilly today.
Yeah,
Some snow.
I was not thrilled to see my sidewalk covered with snow, but here we are. It's March, it's Minnesota, so whatever. But we had our first board meeting since the beginning of the strike to cover from last night, and it was a pretty chaotic one. So Heather, do you want to give us a quick rundown of what happened?
Yeah, so last night the board held a special meeting in order to approve the return to work agreement that we were able to create. Everybody was able to create between ESPs, between MFTs, and between the bargaining unit of the district. And so that was passed with a little bit of chaos in the middle of all of that. And then also there were a lot of people there who were upset about that. And there were people who were hoping to make public comment that didn't get to make public comment. There was a group of students who came to protest and expressed some strong feelings. Ultimately, this whole the consent agenda and the other things did pass, right? The things that we needed to get done passed with a vote of 6-2. And
I actually think it was 5-3. I think Director Cerrillo, Director Elamine, and Director Jourdain all voted against the return to work agreement.
Okay. Yeah. All right. That sounds right. So yeah, it was a chaotic meeting.
It was chaotic. It was very chaotic. It was hard to kind of figure out who did what and how. And so three students came in to protest the meeting as the board was voting. And so it made it really difficult to hear what the vote was and who voted. And then as they went up to, talk to the board was still trying to get through their agenda, trying to listen to the students. But then also it sounded like they were just like, look, we made this decision already. And there are teachers in the room that disagreed with the board's vote. And then there was also a group of parents there who spoke Spanish and were very frustrated with not having the opportunity because there was no public comment and there was no interpretation. And so, yeah, the meeting got chaotic. And I think that's really unfortunate. But the fact of the matter is also that the Minnesota Department of Education has laid out how many instructional hours, days, and minutes students are supposed to receive. And if they don't receive that, the districts will have to pay a fine. I believe folks in the audience were whispering that it was $10. I haven't seen that anywhere. But on top of that, the district would lose resources because of the average daily attendance, right? And the average daily membership. And then not to mention, everyone in Minnesota is fighting for, or at least in Minneapolis, is fighting for the legislature to get the $9.3 billion surplus to fund education better. And so if Minneapolis said, look, we're not going to have these 3 weeks of school, we're not going to make that up, it would send a pretty big message to the Republicans who already don't want to give Minneapolis any money, just give them another reason at least to say, look, you don't want to educate students, why should we give you more money? So that was the tension. And so the board ultimately 5 votes carried the motion, and they ratified again agreement that the teachers, 75% of the teachers also ratified, along with their bargaining unit agreed to. So it was definitely a complicated, chaotic meeting. But at the end of it, we now know that students will be going to school until June 24th. And schools will have 42 minutes added to the end of their day beginning on April 11th. So.
And School Friday.
School Friday.
Yeah. Friday was supposed to be the first day of spring break. It will not be. And so, yeah, so just a lot of things. I mean, I think it was a chaotic meeting at the end of what's been a challenging few weeks, right? And with lots of really amazing things and lots of really hard things for our city again.
Yeah. I think that, I've seen different people say on social media, like it's clear there's a lot of pain and healing that our city, especially in education, has to do. And I don't know where we go from here, but it's difficult for sure. But with that, do we want to talk about our most valuable moments and our do better moments?
Yeah. I mean, so I'll go first with my most valuable moment. For me, it's been really challenging to understand, why do we have these extra days? I've heard many variations and stories about them. Why do we have extra minutes at the end of every day? Who decided that? And so for me, it was really helpful to hear from two specific voices. One was from Dr. Fearing, to really explain like what the guidelines are that we cannot change in Minneapolis public schools, the guidelines that live up sort of above us, right? And how we have to follow those. And then the second part really came from Kendra Bennett, who ended up leading our negotiating team through kind of the final days, where she just really talked about like this is a deal and this return to work agreement happened in a 9-hour meeting that was intense and long, and it was agreed to with the ESP team that was voted in to represent ESPs, and the MFT team that was voted in to represent MFT, and the bargaining unit from MPS. Those three people sat down with the parameters that they had to follow, and then negotiated, and then put forward an agreement. And it was really helpful for me as a parent who isn't, I have mixed emotions. I'm not thrilled with my children being in school till June 24th, and I want them to be academically prepared to go to high school next year, right? I feel both things. And so it was helpful for me to realize that that's how the decisions were made, and that there were some decisions that we didn't get to make in Minneapolis public schools.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I'm still wondering and I don't totally understand is why North High and Henry needed to
Mm.
go the extra 42 minutes as well, because we know that they have 7 period days. Those days are longer than some of our schools in other parts of the district that have shorter school days. And so that's the one thing that I wish was answered better or answered at all that I didn't understand. Because, again, I think we have to remember equity as a principle and not just equality. We don't need to apply all the same things to everybody. And especially when you have these differences in minutes that schools already have. And so that was the one question that I still think wasn't answered, but I agree, having, all the rest of that explained and just really brought out. And again, 75% of the bargaining unit approved the tentative agreement and the return to work plan. I think that's important to acknowledge as well. So, I think the board was in a tough position to hear all of the concerns, but also to know like it would have been really difficult to reopen these negotiations to figure out what the rest of the plan would be. So that's where the board voted last night.
What was your most valuable moment?
So yeah, my most valuable moment was actually from Director Inns, who, so a lot of board members who voted to support the plan expressed like, this is just kind of the space that we're in because of the rules that MDE has laid out for us. But Director Inns, so I felt like, oh, you know what, they're just scapegoating the state, like it's not in their control. It's MDE's fault, basically. Wow. But I appreciated that Director Inns actually owned it and said, like, this is a law that I actually appreciate, and I think it's important that we have a responsibility to educate our students. It wasn't the students' decision, it wasn't the parents' decision to miss 3 weeks of school, and we as a city, me as a board member, I feel like we owe our students these extra days of instruction. And so I appreciated the rationale and the focus on like the learning opportunities that this will create, but I also appreciated just the fact that like he was owning it and it wasn't like a passive thing that he was passing it. And maybe others feel like, look, I would vote another way if the law changed it, or allowed us to, but I did appreciate that Director Inns just like owned the fact that, look, we have to make up 3 weeks of school that were missed. So that was my most valuable moment from last night.
So for my do better moment, I think, what I worry about is that I didn't hear a strong plan about how we were going to restore students academically from the time that was missed. And so I am willing, because there were things that needed to be addressed in our district, right? ESP pay is one that you and I have both felt really strongly about, that we didn't seem to get done before this. But students did lose kind of one of the most peak 3 to 4 weeks of learning that you can get, like that sweet spot right before spring break. I worry that we're going to be able to do that same sort of academic rigor. And I worry that I didn't hear a plan for academic rigor for that 3 weeks in June. And I'm entirely uninterested in, like sending my kids to school in June to do like Dreambox or to, and so I really hope that as a parent, that when we learn a little more about this plan, and it's new and lots of people have to wrap their brains around it, I get that. But I really do hope that I get to understand what sort of academic quality instruction will be available for students during that time.
Right. Yeah, I think it was also frustrating just overall. Like Director Inns had the one comment around like the learning opportunity for students, but overall it just felt like the narrative was really centered around like, this is what MDU is requiring. This feels like retaliation or punishment for teachers, how hard this will be for especially high school students who have jobs. Like those are all real things, right? And also like the district has a responsibility to provide academic benefits to students, and to figure out how do we make up the 3 weeks that were lost. And I didn't even think about like the fact that this was a peak time right before spring break. The type of instruction that was lost is definitely difficult. And how do you make that up? And potentially hot buildings, distance learning distance learning at the end of June, I think is a real question. So I'll say really briefly, my do better moment was just the fact that there wasn't public comment and there wasn't interpreters. Like this doesn't need to consistently be a thing. Like we know that this was the first meeting right after the strike. Even though it was a special board meeting, they could have created public comment. Interpreters were necessary. I don't know why we thought that it would be okay, why the district thought it would be okay to not have interpreters there for this meeting. That's just really challenging. It feels really foolish, and like would have been a way to accommodate, half of the frustrations in the room last night. I'm sure the board members were frustrated they couldn't get through the meeting, and half of the room was just upset that there wasn't interpretation and there wasn't an opportunity for public comment. And that just feels like a clear missed opportunity. And we can't keep making the same mistakes, right? As we can't just keep saying, oh, that's just how Minneapolis operates. At some point, it does feel intentional that we're making some of these decisions. And so I would just say that was definitely a do better moment and really frustrating. But that is it for this chaotic meeting. And thank you for listening. And Heather, thanks for doing this recap once again.
Okay, bye.
Bye.